There's a kind of darkness that doesn't come from the absence of light. It's thicker, older, a darkness that lives behind the skin of things. Most people never see it. They live and die without even knowing it's there. But once you do, once you catch a glimpse, it never lets you go. But secrets have weight, and the one I walked into that night, it was heavy enough to break you. I remember the way the air shifted as I crossed the threshold. The coldness that wasn't cold, a kind of stillness, like the world was holding its breath. There was a smell too, faint but cloying, not flowers or perfume. No, it was older than that. A sweetness gone sour, like fruit left to rot under a blood moon. The guests didn't speak. They moved like shadows, slow, deliberate, as if they feared waking something that watched from the corners. And above it all, a sound, not music, not chanting, but a low, thrumming pulse that you didn't hear so much as feel, somewhere deep in your ribs. That's when I saw them. And Jay-Z, or at least. There are cracks in the world, small ones, most never see them. Most don't want to, I didn't either. But the thing about cracks is, once you notice one, you can't unsee it. You start noticing all the others, the hairline fractures that snake across the fabric of what you thought was reality. The way the stars don't blink in the sky some nights. The way mirrors seem to lag just a second too long before reflecting you back. The way shadows bend toward you, not away. At first it was small, easy to explain away bad dreams, restless nights. Whispers in the walls, just the old pipes settling, I told myself, but pipes don't know your name, and they don't whisper it in a voice that sounds like silk tearing in the dark. I ignored it, I swallowed the unease like bitter medicine, convincing myself it would pass. But it didn't, it grew. My phone would ring, no number, no sound, just the heavy static of breathless waiting. My reflection would smile, even when I didn't. Children would point at me on the street, their small faces contorted in confusion and fear, their tiny hands grasping at the hems of their mother's coats, desperate to be pulled away from me. Dogs barked when I passed, lights flickered when I entered a room. I thought I was losing my mind, but madness, as it turns out, would have been a mercy. It wasn't insanity that was unraveling me, it was recognition. Something beneath the world, something old, patient, and hungry had finally seen me. I tried to fight it. I tried to drown it in noise, in light, in company. But the shadows found me anyway, pooling in the corners of rooms, stretching long fingers along the baseboards, curling up the walls like smoke that no fire could explain. And then the dreams began, vivid, consuming. I dreamt of halls without end, ceilings too high to see, walls lined with faces, featureless, eyeless, mouthless. I walked barefoot across floors slick with something warm and wet, my own heartbeat thudding in my ears like a war drum. At the center of it all was a throne, a monstrous thing, wrought not from wood or stone, but from bone and sinew, wrapped in velvet darker than the void between stars. And sitting atop it, no, waiting atop it was her. Not that the world fawns over, with her impossible beauty and gleaming smile. No, this was something else, something wearing her face the way a wolf wears the skin of its prey. A hollow, sacred corruption, a queen crowned not by adoration, but by dominion. And always beside her, the shadow of a man. Tall, composed, featureless, but for two burning points of light where eyes should have been, not human, never human. A king bound not by love, but by command. I woke from those dreams gasping, drenched in sweat, the sheets tangled around my body like a shroud. But no matter how many times I opened my eyes, the darkness stayed with me, clinging to my skin, sinking into the marrow of my bones. And then, one night, I found myself standing in front of a door I didn't remember approaching. In a city I didn't remember traveling to, dressed in clothes I didn't remember putting on. There were others there too, all of us facing the same door, a monolith of ancient oak, etched with symbols that twisted when I looked at them, as if shy to be seen. No one spoke, no one knocked. The door simply opened, soundless, smooth, revealing nothing but a yawning corridor of darkness beyond. And we stepped forward, not out of choice. I didn't wonder where we were going, I already knew. I just didn't understand what I was walking toward. The air changed the moment we stepped inside. It wasn't just the temperature, though it was colder than the night should have allowed. It was something more. The kind of cold that doesn't sting the skin, but seeps into the lungs, makes the blood sluggish heavy. The walls were close, too close, lined with faded tapestries that seemed to quiver, not with breeze but with breath. The floors, uneven beneath our feet, sank slightly with every step, like the ground itself resented our presence. It smelled of old things, damp earth, charred wood, iron left to rot in the rain. And beneath it all, something sicker, like honey left too long in the sun, fermenting into something foul. There were no windows, no chandeliers, no signs of celebration. No flower, no music, no light except for a few low-burning torches, their flames pale and sluggish, barely illuminating more than a few feet ahead. The hallway stretched forward, impossibly long, the darkness swallowing everything beyond the first few steps. I couldn't see where it ended, I'm not sure it ever did. Along the corridor, others moved with me, though none spoke, none met each other's gaze. Their faces were pale, waxy under the failing light, as if carved from something that used to be alive but wasn't anymore. We moved like pilgrims, like sacrifices walking willingly toward the altar. As I walked, I pressed my hand lightly against the wall, curious, needing to feel something solid, but the wall gave under my touch, the way flesh gives beneath a knife. It shuddered, and I pulled away, bile rising in my throat. The house wasn't old, it wasn't abandoned, it wasn't even haunted. It was alive. And it was hungry. We reached a grand hall, or what should have been one. The ceiling arched high above us, lost in darkness. The walls covered in the same suffocating tapestries, now stitched with threads that glittered faintly, red, black, and something that shimmered sickly between colors the mind can't name. At the far end of the hall stood a dais, not raised but sunken, like a pit turned inside out. And on that dais, hidden beneath a canopy of veils so sheer they seemed woven from mist, sat an altar. No, not an altar, a throne. Tall, twisted, black as starless night, it was not carved, not built. It had grown there, the way tumors grow in living flesh. Around it the room pulsed. The very stones in the floor beat in rhythm, a slow, ponderous thud, like a second, deeper heartbeat behind my ribs. I tried to look away, but my body froze. I wasn't the only one. The others, too, locked in place, heads bowed, arms limp, breath shallow. And then something moved, not in front of us, beneath us. The stones beneath our feet bulged, shifted, the floor heaved, as though something massive stirred just below the surface. I stumbled backward, but my feet wouldn't obey, and then a crack. Fine as a hairline at first, stretching between my shoes, widening slowly. From it spilled not dust, not dirt, but a thin stream of something thick and black, shining like oil, but moving like it had a mind of its own. The darkness crept across the floor, tendrils slithering between the guests' feet, wrapping around ankles with almost tender precision. No one moved, no one screamed. It touched the hem of my coat and the fabric sizzled. A faint hiss, a whisper of smoke curling into the air. I wanted to run, I tried to run. But the moment that black liquid touched me, it was like sinking into tar. Heavy, cold, claiming. My vision blurred, my heart thundered against my ribs. And just as I thought it would pull me under, it stopped. The liquid retracted, slipping back into the crack like a serpent returning to its den. The stones sealed themselves with a wet, sucking sound. The torches sputtered, throwing shadows across the walls, and the hum that had been low and patient all this time rose. It rose like a living thing. It rose like breath held too long, finally exhaling. And then, without fanfare, without announcement, without so much as the scrape of a footstep, they entered. And Jay-Z, or what remained of them. They didn't walk into the hall. They emerged as if summoned from the very bones of the house itself. Appeared first, not the woman known to the world, but a figure that resembled her only in outline. Everything else, the warmth, the life, the humanity, was gone. She wore a gown that shimmered with an unnatural sheen, darker than black, as if it absorbed the little light that remained in the room. Around her shoulders hung a cloak made of what looked like woven shadows, moving gently even in the absence of wind. Her face was obscured beneath a thin veil, but enough was visible to see that her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes, the moment they locked with mine, were black, endless voids that seemed to drag reality inward. On her head sat a crown not of gold or silver, but of what looked like burnt bone and fractured obsidian. The crown was jagged, alive with a faint, pulsing light from stones that shimmered in unnatural colors. As she moved, the symbols carved into the jagged crown twisted subtly, too complex and wrong to belong to any earthly language. Jay-Z followed, standing a few paces behind her. His form was familiar, but there was nothing human left in him either. He wore a dark suit that didn't reflect light. Instead, it seemed to drink it in, making his outline blur at the edges. His face was expressionless, his skin taut, and his eyes, once brown, were now pits of dull crimson light. He didn't blink. He didn't move with grace or charisma. He stood rigid, a hollow vessel, as if only the echo of who he had once been remained. There were no cheers or applause. No music played. The guests, if that word could even apply, remained silent, heads bowed, bodies trembling under an invisible weight. I realized then that we were not here as witnesses. We were here as offerings, an audience not for joy, but for dominion. An old woman in a dark, tattered robe stepped forward, her body hunched, her skin gray and thin like parchment stretched too tightly over brittle bones. In her hands, she carried a heavy book bound in something that looked too pale, too soft to be leather. It pulsed faintly as if it breathed. The old woman opened the book, and from her lips came sounds that didn't belong in the human mouth. It wasn't chanting. It wasn't singing. It was a series of guttural hissing syllables that made the air ripple and pressed painfully against the inside of my skull. The moment she spoke, the floor beneath us responded. It throbbed, vibrating in slow, heavy pulses, like a great heart beating deep within the earth. Closed her eyes as the words filled the hall. As the old woman's voice rose, the air thickened, and the shadows clinging to the walls stretched and writhed. The torches flickered, the flames twisting as if caught in a sudden storm, though the air remained perfectly still. I watched as thin cracks opened along the walls and floor, oozing a viscous, dark substance that smelled of burnt iron and decay. The moment the old woman uttered a final, sharp syllable, its eyes snapped open. They were no longer human. What stared back at us was ancient and bottomless. A swirling darkness shot through with faint, distant stars, as if entire galaxies were being born and dying within her gaze. In that instant, the air tore. A shape bloomed behind her, a shadow so vast it could not be contained by the hall. Wings stretched wide, too many to count, feathers blackened and sharp as knives. The figure towered over her, formless yet oppressive, crowned with horns that curved into the sky. It radiated a heat that wasn't heat, a blinding cold that gnawed at the bones. The guests fell to their knees, not from devotion, from a pressure too immense to resist. Stood still, and from somewhere unseen, a blade was brought forth. It was long and thin, its edge rippling like liquid. Jay-Z stepped forward then, his movements slow and deliberate, and he took the blade in his hands. Without ceremony, without hesitation, he dragged the blade across the palm of his left hand. Thick, black blood oozed from the wound, and he reached up, smearing it across forehead. The moment his fluid touched her skin, the hall roared to life. The walls shuddered, the torches flared and died, and the shadows collapsed inward, sucked into her body. The shadowy figure behind her flared brighter, and for one unbearable second, I saw the truth, not the king of hell as mankind imagines, but the original rebel, the morning star, the first to fall. Lucifer, anointed in dark fluid, crowned in darkness, smiled. It was not a smile for us, it was a smile for him. The room dimmed once more. The old woman closed her book, stepping back into the shadows without a word. The coronation was complete, stood no longer as a queen of people or nations, but as something far greater, a queen of realms beyond, crowned not by earthly hands, but by the will of the one who ruled the unseen. Jay-Z stepped behind her, his eyes still burning faintly, his body rigid, holding the blade down at his side. No applause followed, no music rose. Only silence, thick and total, broken only by the slow, heavy breathing of something vast and satisfied just beyond the reach of sight. The ceremony wasn't a celebration. It was a conquest, and we had already been claimed. The silence after the coronation stretched on, heavy and suffocating. Remained at the center of the hall, motionless beneath her crown, while Jay-Z stood behind her, the ritual blade now lowered but still gleaming faintly in the dim light. From the far reaches of the room, movement stirred. The guests, silent and compliant, began to shift. Slowly, one by one, they rose from their positions, their faces blank, their eyes glassy. There was no command, no visible signal, but they moved as if pulled by unseen strings, stepping forward toward the dais. They approached her in turn, heads bowed, hands trembling at their sides. Each reached into the darkness between them and produced something small, almost invisible, a whisper of light, a flicker of memory, a fragment of what made them themselves. It wasn't a physical object. It was deeper than that, a sliver of their soul, a piece of identity, something vital and irreplaceable. I could see it leaving them, like a mist peeled from their bodies, coiling and drifting upward, weightless and gleaming faintly in the stale air. The old woman stepped forward once more, holding a vessel that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It was a bowl, carved from bone and etched with symbols too complex to understand, too ancient to be benign. The guests lowered their offerings into the vessel, and the fragments dissolved as they touched the surface, vanishing with a faint hiss. There were no screams, no resistance, only a strange, quiet resignation, as if they had been prepared for this moment long before they ever set foot in the hall. Each offering seemed to hollow the person who gave it. I watched as faces grew dimmer, outlines faded, voices stilled to silence. They became shadows of themselves, shells present in body, absent in essence. Stood still as the offerings were made, her eyes reflecting the fragments as they vanished. She absorbed them without touch, without gesture, as if the very act of surrender fed her coronation. When my turn came, I felt my body move against my will, legs carrying me forward on unsteady steps. The air grew thicker with each movement, a pressure against my chest, a weight on my spine. My hand rose, and though I fought it, I felt something being pulled from within me, something essential, something real. It slipped from my fingers like smoke, fragile and shimmering, and I watched, helpless, as it drifted down into the waiting bowl. The moment it touched the surface, pain, not sharp, but deep and endless, bloomed through my chest. A hollowing and unmaking, as if the core of who I was had been scooped out and discarded. I staggered back into the crowd, or what remained of it. Around me, the others swayed, blank and silent, the empty vessels they had become. Eyes glowed faintly now, twin stars burning in the darkness. The old woman lifted the vessel high above her head, chanting words that slithered through the air like smoke. As the final syllable was spoken, the vessel dissolved, not broken, not shattered, but simply ceased to exist, taking with it the last remnants of the souls it had consumed. A hush fell over the hall, deeper than silence, a void where even the air dared not move. Raised her chin, the crown on her brow gleaming with a lightless fire. She had taken what she needed. The coronation was complete. And we, what was left of us, stood as hollow witnesses to her ascension. We had not been guests, we had been offerings. And in surrendering ourselves, we had sealed her reign. When the ritual ended, it was as if a curtain had been drawn closed. The hall fell into darkness, and the silence became absolute, not merely the absence of sound, but the absence of life. I do not remember leaving. None of us do. One moment we stood before her, hollow and empty. The next, we were back in the world we thought we knew. But something was different, not in the streets or the cities, in her. In the days that followed, it became impossible to ignore the shift. Was no longer merely a superstar. She wasn't just a celebrated artist, a singer, or a performer. She was untouchable, beyond human acclaim or criticism. Her presence filled every space, screens, stages, magazines, not just admired but revered. Even those who had once criticized her, those who had questioned her power, found their voices silenced, forgotten, erased. It wasn't natural. It wasn't the result of talent or work ethic, though she possessed both. This was something deeper, something older, the kind of power not won but taken, seized through ancient rites and dark pacts. In quiet corners of the industry, behind closed doors and encrypted calls, whispers began to surface. Whispers of figures who had tried to stand against her, executives, rivals, so-called gatekeepers, only to find their careers withered overnight, their influence evaporated as if it had never existed. Labels that once ruled the industry bent the knee. Media empires that once prided themselves on impartiality sang only her praises. Opportunities, once hard-won through years of struggle, fell into her lap like gifts from unseen hands. It wasn't success. It was dominion. Some said she never aged, that the years passed over her skin without leaving a trace. Others claimed her performances left a lingering emptiness, a sense that something unseen was watching from the shadows of the stage, a presence that was not hers alone. There were rumors, too, of signs hidden in plain sight, symbols woven into album covers, into stage sets, into the very choreography of her performances. Glyphs and sigils, marks of allegiance older than civilization itself, known only to those who studied the forbidden. They called her many things. Queen Bey, the Empress of Pop, the reigning icon. But those were only the names spoken aloud. In secret, behind closed doors where cameras and microphones could not reach, the whispers used another title. One not of music or fame, but of dominion. The queen of the morning star. Those who knew, who dared to understand, saw it clearly. Hadn't risen to the top through the industry's machinery. She was the machinery now, its beating heart, its unseen hand. When the world bowed to her, they thought it was admiration. It wasn't, it was worship. And like all worship, it demanded sacrifice, not of flesh, but of loyalty, of allegiance, of soul. Every award, every standing ovation, every platinum plaque was a tithe, a ritual reaffirming her throne. In the realm where power is currency and influence is blood, sat unrivaled, her crown invisible to the naked eye but etched into the bones of the industry itself. Few could see it, fewer still dared to speak of it, but I knew because I had stood before her as she was crowned, and I knew the truth. Didn't just rule the music world. She owned it by right of darkness, by bloodless conquest, by the will of the one who fell first and furthest. I once believed the ritual ended when we left that place, that by stepping outside its walls, we could leave what we had witnessed behind. But the truth, as it revealed itself slowly and quietly, was that we had never really left. The binding had already begun. At first, it was almost unnoticeable. Memories would slip away, names of familiar streets, faces of people I had known for years, conversations that once felt important. They dissolved at the edges, fading before I could catch them. Days lost their structure. Time stretched thin and strange. There were hours I couldn't account for, moments when I would find myself in a place with no memory of how I arrived. And it wasn't just me. Others who had been there began to fade as well, not visibly, but subtly, as if they were being erased from reality one fragment at a time. A colleague I once spoke to every day was simply gone, and no one else seemed to remember she had ever existed. Her name wasn't on my phone. Her face wasn't in photographs. It was as if the world had edited her out without warning or explanation. The realization came slowly, heavy, and inescapable. The ritual we witnessed hadn't ended when the crown was placed. It hadn't demanded immediate sacrifice. It demanded presence, and in return it required pieces of us. Not in ways the world could see, not with wounds or violence, but in ways far more complete we were unraveling. Memory by memory, moment by moment, identity slipping away, offered to something greater. And with every accolade she received, every sold-out stadium, every award lifted in her name, something in us diminished further. Not because of jealousy or bitterness, but because the ritual tethered us to her ascent. We had become part of her foundation, the quiet, unseen cost of her reign. Wasn't just a figure elevated by fame and talent. She had become something else, a monarch crowned in secrecy, reigning over more than music and culture. Every cheer, every standing ovation, every headline proclaiming her greatness strengthened her hold and weakened ours. We hadn't attended a celebration. We had witnessed the birth of a kingdom built not on adoration, but on silent surrender. We were bound to it, not by chains, not by force, but by a slow, inevitable drift, pieces of ourselves offered up, willingly or not, through the simple act of having stood too close. Escape wasn't a choice. There was no leaving, only forgetting. And the more the world celebrated her, the more I faded. I wasn't sure how much longer I had before even my reflection forgot who I was. But I knew one thing, with every tribute laid at her feet, a little more of me was already gone. Time has no meaning anymore. I measure my life now in fragments, fleeting moments of clarity between long stretches of emptiness. Faces blur, Names dissolve before I can recall them. The mirror reflects someone I almost recognize, but not quite. The world continues as if nothing has changed. Music videos, magazine covers, sold-out tour, her presence everywhere, unavoidable, inevitable. The louder the applause grows, the thinner I become. It isn't death, it isn't even loss. It's erosion, a gradual dissolving of self, as if who I was is being washed away, grain by grain, with every cheer, every headline, every whispered praise. Some days I wonder if I even existed at all. I pass through crowds like smoke. No one notices. No one remembers. Friends who once knew me well pause, frown, and move on, their minds unable to grasp the shape of what they're forgetting. I've tried to leave. I've traveled, changed my name, disappeared from places I once called home. But it doesn't matter. The binding isn't to a place. It's to her, to the throne she now occupies, a seat carved not by adoration, but by surrender. And I surrendered the moment I stepped into that hall. There's a price for worship, even the kind no one believes they're giving. You don't feel it at first, you don't even notice. But slowly, surely, it takes root. Every tribute, every broadcast, every whispered accolade feeds it, feeds her. I am almost nothing now, a breath, a memory. A shadow fatting from the walls of a world too, enamored to notice. And she reigns still, crowned in silence, unseen by those who kneel willingly. You think you're immune. You think you're just a fan, an admirer, a bystander. But tell me, have you ever forgotten something important? Something that once mattered, and you can't explain why? Have you ever felt a part of yourself slip away in the background noise of adoration and fame? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just the way life works. Or maybe you've already given more of yourself than you realize. Maybe you're already bound too. Some stories aren't meant to be told. Some truths aren't meant to be heard. But if you're still here, you already know. Forgetting comes easy when the world chooses silence. Like if you've ever felt something slipping away. Share this if you think someone else needs to remember. Subscribe and stay aware of what the world wants you to forget.